So today we're talking about ABM and is it the best strategy for B2B? And especially as we head into some uncertain times and really look at how do we prioritize our marketing resources. So the questions that we have pre-sent to the panel are going to really focus on how do we solve, how do we staff, how do we ideate around some challenges that aren't really new to us. The first one is we want to be better marketers. We are all in this field because we're passionate about our customers. We're passionate about the data that informs what they do. And that leads us to our second challenge. We really want what we do as marketers to be valued by sales. And then the third challenge, we're always looking to stimulate growth. And that's more important now than ever. I guess it's always really important, but it feels like we're going through a new wave of importance. So today's panel will answer questions around what is ABM marketing? Who is it for? What is the value of ABM and how can we measure it? And then we'll end with how do we get started? So a lot of people on this call may have just heard of ABM and have not given it a chance. I know a lot of other people on this call have actually tried to sell it in and have failed, have been met with resistance and blockers. And so I hope today gives you a good grounding starting point to kind of re-kick that off and look at ABM through a different lens. So let's get started with some introductions. Damaris, you want to go first? Tell us what's your name, what is your title, and where do you work now? And maybe how long have you been practicing ABM or really just sales targeted marketing in general?
Sure. So my name's Damaris Santiago. I currently am the Vice President of Marketing at an organization called Learning A to Z. Learning A to Z makes literacy supplemental products for K through 5 teachers and school districts. In terms of ABM, I think I have kind of gotten my start around 2016. I began because at the time I was using a consultant called Serious Decisions, which is now Forrester, and they had started a new account-based marketing approach. And at the time, it solved a really specific need I had. And for us, it was going after our existing targeted accounts and expanding. So that kind of got me down the rabbit hole of ABM. So
nice. Ryan, just our most recent guest on Leader Generation, talking about ABM. You want to introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about where you work?
All right. Well, hi, everyone. My name is Ryan Elmager. I work actually with a company by the name of ServiceNow. We're a workflow management software company based out of Santa Clara, California. So I have, I have been kind of in the ABM space. I've made a transition over the last couple of years. I've been in a kind of a field marketing role, leadership role for the past 10, 12 years. So it's been quite an exciting journey. I'll tell you, I will say that you all are blessed to have Damaris on the call as well. I've learned a lot. She and I worked together at Learning A to Z before I moved over to ServiceNow. Learned a lot from her to kind of elevate the ABM practice also, and kind of really keeping that technology at the forefront on how you could leverage that within this space. So excited to talk to all of you today, and I'll kick it over here to Paul.
Thanks, Ryan. My name is Paul Berzola. I'm the Vice President of Sales and Marketing with JBT Corporation. And JBT is a large publicly traded manufacturer in the B2B space, primarily serving the food industry. And I've been in essentially doing ABM in one way, shape, or form for most of my career. The unique perspective that I'll bring to the panel today is obviously on the B2B side, but also for a large portion of my career, I've been on the marketing side. And then most recently, in the last few years, I've been on the sales side. So I've really been able to, kind of live both sides of the fence and have seen the benefits and the challenges really of being an account-based focused sales and marketing commercial person. So looking forward to the conversations today and looking forward to learning from you guys too. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Well, let's kick it off with the definition, or if you could, Damaris, in a few sentences, tell us what is ABM?
Sure. So I'd like to drop the marketing piece from that. I'd say account-based approach. I think that's the best way to think about it. What I've learned just trying to engage in this strategy over the last couple of years is putting just marketing in the title doesn't do it justice. So I think of it as a focused approach to B2B go-to-market between sales and marketing, in which you work together to target your best fit accounts to turn them into customers.
That's a great way to summarize that. Best fit account, I think, is an awesome definition. So then, Paul, when we're thinking about, how do we define best fit? What are kind of, from a sales perspective, the factors that you're looking at to say, yes, this is how I would define a best fit account?
It's a great question. It seems like there's a handful of major things, especially in a space where you're selling a highly customized technical product. It has to fit the purpose. I mean, that's the main important thing. But more specifically, in most organizations, the drive is to find the most largest customer lifecycle profitability. So trying to find the customer that, in segments within the customer and accounts that really provide you with the most sustainable competitive advantage and profitable growth over the course of their use of the product. And to do that is obviously the challenge, but also the living it, breathing it, and executing, especially in today's world, is the real major challenge. But yeah, it's always been find the customers that provide you the most sustainable competitive advantage and profits.
Yeah. Ryan, do you have anything to add to that?
I would agree with a lot of what Paul just has said, and most agree with most all that he said. And I would add that the account selection process, it really is, it is formulaic in a lot of ways. You really got to look at that opportunity size, and there's various categories that can go there. That achievability is, can you actually, are you a good fit for that opportunity size? And then a biggie that we often look at is that collaborative spirit inside the business. Like, do you have the support, the partnership with sales, the partnership with those content experts to really create and shape that content to really meet market needs and meet those imperatives? So it is critically important to take a look at that criteria when you're because ABM doesn't fit across the board for all accounts, and I think that's really important to mention here as we kind of kick off that selection process.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. Where do you think what kinds of accounts don't fit for an account-based approach?
That was for me, I assume.
Oh yeah, Ryan.
Sorry, I didn't know that was kind of an open floor. So again, I think if you have, again, we have a rubric that we have a very rigid scoring process that we go through. It takes about 6-8 weeks sometimes to really pull that data across the board. And if you really score these accounts and you see you're putting all of that criteria together in that rubric, and you see that they're falling short in certain areas, you're ranking your accounts. You're going to have some that are going to naturally hit, a high fit for the ABM process and the program. And for those that kind of hit that bottom, you do want to have conversations about them, and they may have a better place in the business, meaning they could be nurtured by other areas of the business to kind of bring them up to a certain capacity or reshape. But they can fall off. They can fall off quickly as far as consideration, and that really should be a data-driven decision that you make with your sales partners, not independent. I think that's critically important because that buy-in is important. That they have to support that decision with their teams and their organization and up to the executive level of why you've selected. So if you hit that part, you may have a great opportunity in place, but if you have no partners to execute in the business, you don't have a good solution in place for that opportunity, you're going to fall flat. So it's not a good fit. So
It
Damaris,
starts, yeah, I think it's what you identified. It's identifying that criteria, and anything that falls outside and doesn't meet that criteria, it's going to be unique to your business, right? So if you're working on that criteria, for example, and maybe you have a threshold for size and volume or number of employees, revenue size, those sorts of things, you just want to make sure that they fit within that criteria. And if they don't, you ultimately want to drop those accounts from your programs. We're really fortunate in education that we have a really finite ICP. We understand our target market really well, so that walking in, I think for me on the ABM side was a little easier at this organization because the sales side knew their accounts so well. It was just prioritizing which accounts to go after and which buckets. But yeah, I think it starts with knowing your ICP really well.
Yeah, one area that we've also looking at accounts is from the who do we not want to do business with? Starting with the opposite, saying the obvious things is ethical behavior and you know, you know, financial security and all those. These are things we definitely do not want to be doing business with. But what's been fortunate over the last few years is that business, especially in our industry, has been so prolific that we can now add more to the what's not on that table. We're not going to be with non-progressive customers that are not going to be thinking about, automation and technology, that just want to be transactional. And you could start to, build that not side, and then you can go to the, okay, now what within those that are not in that not list, how do we find the right accounts and how do we want to service them from a different perspective? So sometimes I always tell people, in anything, like, start with what you don't want. It's kind of like the cons list. Like, put that list down first, and then that usually does a good job of putting you into the space that you need to do for refining who you do want to go after.
So I've heard some really good, clear benefits. ABM helps you prioritize who's most important. And the criteria that you use for that is really a reflection of your values and some metrics that mean the most to your business, whether it's revenue size, volume, frequency of purchase. I know what has to be a challenge from my experience is you're still getting random, maybe not so random, but requests from the sales team. Like, hey, marketing team, if we had this feature, we know we could push this, or we got this big trade show coming up, we just need to make the booth look flashy. How do you kind of create that alignment and stave off reactive marketing and stay within this sort of more formulaic and proactive approach?
Yeah, I could take that one in terms of just one of the things that I really pushed in our organization was collaboration with our marketing team and especially our product segment team to say, I'm not going to be your typical salesperson that's going to bring you random stuff that you have to react to and try to get my attention. I'm going to let you drive the bus in terms of where you want us to go. And a lot of times in the B2B space, it's product driven. So what I've done is basically built my sales incentives around our marketing team's initiatives. So they're aligned from compensation because that is what drives the salespeople's, for the most part. And we're very clear on our compensation package that, we want to drive top line revenue, but we also want specific stuff that's related to innovative new products, innovative new services, and we're going to reward you for it because that's what the marketing and business team is putting as their growth initiatives and their focus so that we're staying lock and stock with them. So incentivizing sales around it is a really important piece, and collaborating with the business segments and the marketing teams to make sure that that's aligned, and that changes every year, and it should, but I think that's a really good way of sort of forcing the connection between the two groups.
Yeah, I do something similar. We create joint sales and marketing plans, right? And they both have a revenue target that they're working towards. When they're working through those programs, I do give a lot of just leeway to the marketer, right? Like the marketer is almost like the GM of the business in terms of how they're going to allocate the spend to hit that number in terms of marketing programs. So while we get lots of requests and ideas around random acts of marketing, like it's their job to hold to the plan that they've both agreed to, right? Like, so, hey, your objective is $5 million this quarter, right? We agreed that we're going to do X, Y, and Z. We have to stick to the plan to hit these goals ultimately. But that's sort of how I like to dissuade from there. And then honestly, the best way to get sales on board is getting a couple wins under your belts. Like that dynamic doesn't start to change until you start netting accounts and winning opportunities.
Yeah. And Ryan, I feel like you'll have a good perspective having experience in field marketing. Sometimes I feel like you're just going to where the sales team's pointing you.
Yeah, you know, I love that. I love this topic because it is, I could probably talk for hours about this one, but you know, from at ServiceNow, we have a very defined process about how we go about building that plan. It is a partnership, as Damaris had alluded to, with sales and a variety of other stakeholders in the business. We actually have a very formalized workshop that we do that can take up to 2 months. We have a lot of our agency partners host and run those workshops. But the idea behind them is that we're identifying key imperatives that the business, again, it's not focusing on what the sales team most importantly is trying to accomplish. It is, what is the customer, what is the account or subset of accounts that if you're grouping them within a cluster, trying to accomplish? What are those key problems that they're trying to solve within their strategic plans? We identify those three. We typically hone in on about 3. I mean, really, that is an area of focus, and we build a strategy to those imperatives. And really, the framework we go through is, how do we impact reputation within the account? How do we build relationships within the account, and how do we drive revenue? So it's not always something that we hone right in on that revenue aspect. But I will tell you that partnership with sales is critical. I do see a very, how do I say this? I almost would put a very hard line in between the field marketing and the ABM function. And I think they naturally start to blend and blur at times, where I think in some cases that field marketing function can be more of, every business sets it up differently, but it can be a little bit more of that reactive, sales driven strategy. Whereas the ABM is truly that account driven strategy that is being built from the beginning. And I don't know if Paul and Damaris would agree with that sentiment.
I would 100% agree. I mean, it really is important. I always kind of joke, and we had a conversation with a product category manager the other day, and we were down in this category, and he made the comment. He said, "Well, Paul, where should we go?" And I said, "Wrong question. You tell me. Where should we be going?" That's, to me, you're the, as Damaris put it, the GM. You're the CEO of the product line. You tell us, in your opinion, the accounts, the spaces, the regions, the areas, the price points, all this. Because if left to sales, we're going to go to the quickest, easiest, fastest realm to get a business, and it's really important to have that and empower the marketing team, especially it depends on your organization. In our organization, we have product managers, and then we have sort of our key account managers, and then our salespeople, and all 3 of those groups work in tandem, because as the companies and accounts get more complex, that's where it becomes even more difficult, because you have different decision makers at different locations and different priorities. So, but yeah, I 100% agree, Ryan.
Yeah. Damaris, do you have anything to add?
No, agree with what you two have said. I think it's just for sure that partnership between sales and marketing has to be pretty tight.
So we've covered a lot of what ABM is, and I just want to call out, this is like a massive mindset shift from what we even see in other kind of buzzword marketing, like inbound marketing. So you're starting not with what's the sales team's goals, or what's marketing's goals, or what products are we launching this year, and what do we want to get from that. You're looking at coming together with a shared plan around your target businesses, and, to use Ryan's word, their imperatives, but what are their challenges and needs, and how do we align our communication under that? So with that massive shift, how does that impact then how you execute things like content marketing and email. And Damaris, do you want to start?
Yeah, it impacts quite a bit of the way you want to think about these things. The other thing about ABM that folks don't mention, it requires a pretty high degree of personalization, right? So when you think about, if I'm going after these target accounts, I need to know who the key buyers are. Is there a buying committee? Sometimes there's 3-4 personas I have to influence. You now need to think about how do you personalize content and the reach to each of those buyers within that account, right? So it's a huge, huge lift up front to stand up ABM style campaigns. So that's the other thing that I think is pretty surprising to folks walking into this strategy, right? Understanding how much of a content build is necessary up front to execute.
Yeah. Ryan, anything to add?
100% agree. I mean, ABM is a very, very flexible model. I mean, you can get to that one-to-one. You can focus on a couple very specific accounts, and in that instance, I think the less accounts and the more focused you get, and the higher revenue opportunities, the more personalized your content gets. Yeah, you can get to that one-to-few and one-to-many kind of aspect in marketing. But the benefit of ABM, and I know in our practice, we don't touch a one-to-many in our practice from an ABM practitioner side. We only exclusively focus on one-to-one and one-to-few accounts. When I say one-to-few, that's identifying cluster of 15 or less accounts that we focus on. And the reason is our expertise is in that personalization of content. If more personalized, the customer's gonna appreciate the effort and the understanding that you have for their business, and it typically resonates better and faster and quicker. And you really know you're winning when your customer is bringing you in to help elevate your business within their walls. We're seeing a little bit of that now in some of our one-to-one accounts. So yeah, that was very long-winded to Damaris. I agree, but it's critical.
Yeah. So Paul, personalization requires knowing the customer very well, like not just having personas that go across many different types of businesses. So what are some tools that you've used in the past to really dig deep into the different customer types and different customers individually within an account?
Yeah, that's a great question, and we've used what I would consider our tribal knowledge as a starting point for all of our touch points at different accounts, as our sort of starting book for a playbook, if you will, on who to customize messages for from our account strategies. The nuances that we've had to adjust to over the years has been really making sure that at every level within an organization, we not only are pushing out the content that is relevant and specific to them during a certain time or opportunity identification, but also that there's forensics coming back, that we know that they've been involved and they've seen it and they've viewed it and they've absorbed it. But also there's a group that's viscerally making touch points with those different levels, whether it's top to top at my level or director level, key account-based managers that are talking with corporate engineers and corporate decision makers, and then account managers within the region that talk with plants. We make sure that each message is going out to their liking, but more importantly, it's not just the giving it to them, but also connecting the personal touch with the right type of person that speaks the same language, speaks the same lingo, has the same sort of level to level interaction. And it's a kind of an organic way of bringing them together, so that it's not just a digital play, but also it's a face to face, and it's more personalized as well. So it's evolved over time, but in a business, especially one where there's a lot of decision makers, a lot of influencers, a lot of different locations, regions, sometimes globally, it's so important to be able to be aware and make awareness across all those places, rather than just relying on one touch point, because in my experience, that's the best way to bridge the time gap to market, as well as making the internal selling of a product a lot easier for your customer.
Yeah, I think that learning about the customer and research is probably one of my favorite phases of kicking off any project. But Damaris, is there like a stage or a plateau of analysis paralysis? Like, how much should you be investing? How much time and money should you be investing in research and building account-based personas?
Depends on the potential opportunity size, right? If we're talking about 6-7 figure opportunity, it's definitely worth doing the account research. So a good example, a program we ran at another organization I was at, we were going after healthcare hospital systems, a parent company and 6 subsequent hospitals. If we landed each of those, it was 2 million annually in revenue, right? So you can imagine the type of deep intelligence and research we went into, understanding, like reading their corporate reports, what are their major initiatives, what are they spending, what are the big projects that are happening within the account that they're working on within IT. So that level is definitely prudent if the opportunity value of the account is there in size, right? And it meets your ICP and all those good things. I think we got to the point where we, even outside of the business, we understood their personal hobbies, right? So we did like a direct mail campaign because one of the buyers we knew was into cooking. We sent her a cookbook, right? Anything just to get on the radar of these people that sort of made decisions on a wider basis for the hospital system.
Oh my gosh, I love that example. That is fantastic. Ryan, do you have any other examples of where you've used that customer intelligence to do something highly personalized and creative?
No, I think Paul and Damaris really hit a lot of the key points there. And the reality of it is yeah, you have to, if you're not taking that time and you're not blocking that time to understand the customer, you're going to miss the mark right out of the gate, and they're going to discount your efforts right out of the gate. So we leverage a variety of resources at our bit. We have, being ServiceNow is a massive company, we recognize that a lot of companies don't have the resources to, internal resources, specific research departments, things like that, that can really dig into an account. But we look at it at multiple layers. We look at it from a CRM side and a sales insight side. From an internal perspective, we leverage, Dun & Bradstreet and a lot of those executive profiles, a lot of those business profiles to really understand that side. We do specific research projects on just signals that are being sent out in social media platforms and things like that. Things that, as Damaris said, kind of those strategic plans for the business. If you're not mapping to those, you're missing it from the beginning. So we use that content in a variety of forms to really, one, make sure we know that they're the right fit, and that's part of our scoring, but also to personalize the content going in to make sure that we are speaking to their imperatives accurately and identifying what those are and what points they're trying to accomplish and how our business can solve the problem.
Yeah, just one of the things that we've done with our key account management group is we've created a primarily through LinkedIn, is an understanding of where key new roles come into an organization that weren't there before, and make that imperative to understand why they were added, and working with our customers to do that research either directly through them or finding out in some way, shape, or form. So if a customer of ours all of a sudden adds 3 new sustainability officers or key people, for example, we want to know why. What's going on? Is that an issue that's going on? Is that just a growth initiative on your end? That's an example of, like, we have a group that's one part of their job is to see who else is coming in and out from a job standpoint. And they usually troll their LinkedIn sites and make sure they keep track of things. And then we'll do special ideation sessions. We just started to do that last year, where we'll do like what Damaris said. We'll go to the customer's corporate. Usually they have some kind of a corporate scorecard or corporate worksheet that tells about what their initiatives are. And we learn and do homework off of their annual reports and say, here's things that really they're saying it matters to them. So now let's go take that information and go back and have brainstorming ideation sessions where we're listening and trying to figure out, bring this to life in the context of your plants or your people. And that's a new thing for us, because it's always deprioritized, especially in times where business is good, because you've got a lot of, tactical stuff that you could be doing. But we've started to do more of that, where we're doing our own homework, our own research on our companies, and going back to them and being more of an informed partner to them, especially those key accounts that we've identified as progressive and, thought-provoking and innovative on their end.
So I think something that's been consistent in all of these answers is that you're using potential revenue, potential growth to determine how much you're going to invest in the program and to determine how you're going to measure success. And something that's I've heard a lot about ABM is it's easy to measure ROI because you're starting with numbers, you're starting with rubrics and frameworks. And we've also heard a lot about who you're targeting, their committees, these accounts. So ABM really works well for companies that have known accounts, who are willing to invest in research and put in the time to create personalized programs and have a clear line of sight on what this potential could be. Is there an area or an industry or types of businesses where ABM is not a good fit? Damaris, you want to start?
Yeah. So really small ACVs or deal sizes, right? So for example, product-led growth type companies, right? So companies that do like free trials, that sort of thing, right? So you're gonna want to think of like your Dropboxes or Slack before it was part of Salesforce, right? Not a great model for ABM unless you're pursuing a product trial that should turn into a large enterprise sale. But typically it's going to be just those lower deal sizes. The math doesn't shake out in terms of time allocation, resource allocation.
Ryan, anything to add?
No, I 100% agree with everything she just said there. So.
Yeah, I think from my perspective, would be there is a level of type of business that makes it hard to operate with an ABM strategy. The ones that come to mind are smaller, privately held, family owned, sort of the decisions and strategies are done at the dinner table. They're not done in the boardroom. Those types of companies tend to be a little bit harder to sort of get on board with this, and be able to craft a strategy to them. They tend to be a little bit more either too risk averse or too erratic in some cases in the way they do business, or so one-dimensional in their approach, where they'll take in but they don't give out. So they could be $2 million business or $200 million. It depends on the size. I hate to use size sometimes because sometimes the sizes are pretty prominent, but just their mode of operation, because they're family owned, privately held. Not all of them, but those tend to be the ones that are harder to kind of see the value in ABM.
Yeah. So I think another big shift is we have thinking about the customer and the account first and what they need, but then how does that impact how we measure the success of these campaigns? A lot of our clients, we're still asking for reporting on how many visits did my website get? How many people downloaded this piece of content? What's the impression size? What are the KPIs that really matter to account-based marketing? And Ryan, you get to start this time.
Okay. Well, this is a loaded one. I mean, obviously, most businesses go to the revenue impact. So, I mean, if you really think about meetings set, opportunities created, velocity of deals. So you have that narrative around that are a little bit easier to track, using, kind of a well set up tech stack in a business. But there are also some of those reputation and relationship measurements that are a little looser and anecdotal and harder, but they should not be discounted. And I really want to express that, because if you really think about ABM, a lot of I get in some conversation with sales team members, and they said we need more ABM, like it's a product or a kind of like but it should be a long game. In the end of the day, our programs are no less than a year. Very average 16 months, typically up to 2 years. So we should be setting those expectation and benchmarks and have periodic touch bases to make sure that we're hitting them along that like I said, let's say year to 2 year journey. Not saying you can't do ABM in a lesser, but typically that's what we try to set it up in our space. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that requires a lot of patience.
Does.
That's a big expectation to set, especially with a sales team. Paul, do you have any other metrics to add?
No, the hard metrics Ryan mentioned that we use a lot is very similar. Opportunities created, velocity. The what I call the softer metrics that we have been doing more recently with targeted, if you want to say account-based promotions and or campaigns, is we've been looking now more at the we call the viral tail, like how far is that information going within the organization. And we've got some forensics now with Showpad and some other tools that we use where we can see, we went to customer contact A, but it ended up at B, C, and D, and then E took it to X, Y, Z. And we start to look at that and see, okay, how much of our viral load, if you will, is this really working for us? It doesn't translate necessarily to a opportunity or sale per se, but it shows that whatever it is sort of on their own getting pushed out within their organization. And that's a clear indication to us that, hey, we got something here. It's touched a nerve with some people. And we look at that now whenever we do sort of our launches out. And what's nice is we put that back into the hands of the sales team directly too, so they can use their tools to do it themselves, and they can see it as well. And then we aggregate all that data and look at all those viral trails and say, hey, wow, this is really working in this area or this part of the country. So it's a softer metric, but it's nonetheless one that we kind of use to look at, are we getting traction on a particular account-based strategy?
Yeah, I like that. It reminds me of magazines' pass along value. I try and say, like, if they read this magazine, how many? Damaris, are there any other metrics that when we're thinking about this long timeline to measurement, are there things that marketers can look at to say, okay, we are getting some early traction. We know we're going down the right path to continue to investing in this highly personalized approach?
Yeah. So we're actually using an account-based funnel, like that traditional funnel that from leads. There is actually an account-based version of that, right? So for us, we're measuring progression through that funnel. There's stages. I think all those like leading indicators that you talked about are highlighted in each of those stages. So for example, is there awareness very top of funnel, right? In our target accounts, like how do we start measuring awareness? They're engaging with our content, right? We're like taking all that activity and seeing that we're moving the needle and they're progressing to the next stage, right? We actually are looking at marketing qualified accounts versus marketing qualified leads. So that means we've got a number of the key stakeholders within the accounts engaged, and it's time for sales to take an action on that account, right? We've identified, hey, this account's hot, they've got interest and intent, let's send them over to sales. So we are looking at progression through that funnel, and that tells us whether we're like moving the needle or not. Like, are these folks progressing through stages? There's some accounts that won't ever make it past the target stage, right? We can't just make a dent into them. So I think just monitoring that funnel in the same way that you would as in a lead process, just it's a totally different funnel and different stages to measure.
Yeah, so you're kind of pulling it down to really just focus on that account. I feel like I'm going to butcher this quote, but there was a quote from David Ogilvy that was, oh God, it's not the number of people you count. It doesn't matter how many people you reach. It's if you reach the right people. And,
that's right.
Count the right people, not all the people.
That's right. And sometimes you can have a ton of like noise in the account, but it's not the right people, right? So like, that's not an MQA for us unless the right decision makers that we've identified are engaged.
So we've talked about who it's for. We're talking about value. I saw a question come in, but before we get to the questions, I'd love to just hit on how we can get started. So I'll start with you, Ryan. If a marketer wanted to kick off an ABM program, what's the best way that they can start and something that's achievable and they don't bite off too much?
I think I had mentioned this in the podcast that we had done together. I think one thing that is critically important is identifying that core team that's going to be around, kind of going to be digging into this. Go through that training. There's so many training outlets out there. I mean, Damaris mentioned Sirius. I went through ITSMA. We follow ITSMA. Make sure you understand truly some of the methodology behind ABM from out of the gate. I learned this from Damaris, and I couldn't express this more. Pilot. Start small. Get that agreement from your executive level that that's what you're going to do. If we've had some learnings, I would say, on the learning A to Z side, even of sales gets excited, really excited. The term account-based marketing starts taking its own terminology and it just starts running, and everybody says, I want ABM, and but they don't even know what they're asking for. But the idea here is get that training to kind of roll this up, get that training, get that leadership alignment, identify some pilots, and then get a use case in place that you can bring to the rest of the business. And then that ultimately will set you up for success from the beginning. Otherwise, it gets hairy really quick.
Yeah.
Speaking from experience, for sure.
Yes, I think we've all gone a little too far. One thing that I think is really interesting, even when you're talking about getting started, and a lot of this conversation has focused on the investment of people power and being strategic and being creative and knowing how to score accounts on numeric values, but really you're working on that alignment first. What is the role of technology and where should that come in if I'm just getting started with account-based marketing? And Damaris, can you kick us off on that?
Good pick.
One second. What's going
No
on?
problem.
Let's see. Can y'all hear me now? Okay, there you go. So the role of technology is secondary. I think, like Ryan said, really just hone in on the strategy first, learn what ABM is, hone in on the target account selection. Where technology comes to play is it's going to give you scale, right? So when you talk about these one-to-one programs, one-to-many, technology will help you scale those programs from one-to-one to one-to-many, right? So when you start thinking about how am I going to target all of these accounts at once, that's when you're going to start thinking about technology to reach all these accounts. There's a number of vendors out there today. I feel like everyone now brands themselves as an ABM technology provider. There are plenty out there. I've used just about all of them, I'd say. But most of the technology that's out there when it comes to ABM is going to be around ad serving technology to your accounts. So the Terminuses of the world, Six Senses, they'll have you load in your accounts into their platform and then target them with retargeting display banners, and they let you plug in third-party channels. I will say I would not jump to that step until you've really honed in on what your strategy is, your account selection. Maybe you have some small wins. You've been sending, I don't know, email automation programs, direct mail. I would not move to technology because it's a pretty expensive investment until you've got that first pilot under your belt or a little bit of maturity there. Otherwise, you're going to sign up for said technology and not use it for about a year, just speaking from experience here.
Yes, yeah, definitely have seen that. Paul, anything to add before we jump into questions?
I think Damaris hit it right on the head. Don't let perfection get in the way of progress. You don't have to have all of the fancy tools. If you've got a pretty solid CRM system and you've got a pretty solid email marketing or marketing automation platform, and you've got a really good collaboration between sales and marketing, you can get the approaches for ABM off the ground and still have the same sort of core, the core capabilities out there. I guess it's just always been on the manufacturing side. We've always had to do a lot with a lot less. So we've always had to be kind of resourceful, but don't sell your information, the information short, and the collaboration pieces. And that's really the big piece. The tools can come, certain technology facilitates things, maybe gives you a different angle how you're trying to push an approach with a select group of accounts or your account management team. But focus on the people and getting the people that are going to be involved, and then also recognize that you don't have to have a fully integrated plan to start. You could start with what you think could be a target. If it's, hey, I'm going to pull one really progressive salesperson, a project manager, and my marketing lead, and we're going to try doing something for a particular, offering or solution or product or service that we think would be really good for a certain account accounts, and we're going to build something around it. I think that's it gets to Ryan's point about piloting. Don't be afraid to pilot something like that, because a lot of times you'll be surprised at, first of all, how fast it is because you've got a smaller group, but more importantly, how resourceful you can be with the stuff that you have.
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more. So we're going to jump into some questions. Our first one comes from Tom Barnes. Do you have an ABM template for targeting one-on-one enterprise accounts that you can share? Something that is like a visual timeline or a funnel that shows those various sales and marketing touch points. And Damaris, we'll start with you since you mentioned that in one of your answers.
I do. I have a couple that I'm happy to share after this call. I've got a couple scenarios that show you, like, depending on the buying stage, what the touch points you should think of. And this is a really important one because sales wants to use the same tactic for every stage in the journey, right? So it's really important for you to map this stuff out up front and define what sales is going to do and what marketing is going to do in each stage.
Would that be okay to send out to this group after the? Oh, awesome.
Yep, happy to share it.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I feel like every time you get into a crunch, the reaction is to, just
send an email, sign up for a trade show for sure.
Yes. Yep. The next question comes from Tom Madrelejos from ModOp. In your experience, is there a specific role who should ultimately own and be responsible for the account selection and the account rubric, knowing that there will be stakeholders' opinions across the organization? And Ryan, why don't you take this question?
I don't know if that was on my end, but I lost part of that question. I couldn't hear it all. Sorry, if you could repeat it real quick for me, please.
No problem. So it's from Tom Madrelejos. In your experience, is there a specific role who should ultimately own and be responsible for the account selection and the account rubric, knowing that there will be other stakeholders?
Absolutely. I mean, really, if you have ABM practitioners in your business and you've really built that ABM house internally, that marketing manager practitioner is the one that owns it. I mean, that is hands down the person that owns it and drives it. It's collaborative as far as kind of the information that they pull in, but their job is to make sure that they're aggregating, analyzing, pulling all that together, and putting a recommendation for the business forward and starting that dialogue. So somebody in like my role, again, I'm a practitioner for ServiceNow. That is my job to do.
Yeah, I feel like something you're emphasizing, to put it differently, is somebody has to take the ABM hat and put it on.
Oh gosh,
this is my role, and this is what I'm going to be focused on.
Oh yeah, you can't make this again. It can be a vast crowd that can come into this process, but there has to be somebody driving the bus. It has to. So
that's great. The next question from Shannon Sullivan from ModOp asks, what do you think are the best engagement methods outbound for reaching your target accounts? What media do you think is the most effective? And Damaris, do you want, or Paul, do you want to take that one?
Yeah,
I was going to say, I didn't think you wanted to. Damaris, you want to take a stab at that? No.
Sure.
Okay, I thought you were being like,
this is a loaded one. I feel like I get this question all the time, right? Like, the president and CEO wants to know what's the one thing so I can give you a bunch of money to go do that one thing. The answer is there isn't one specific engagement method. It's really a multi-channel approach, and it's really dependent on the target you're going after. So if you've done that research, you know your ICP, you know the stakeholders you're trying to reach. Each of them is going to have a preferred method or channel they consume, right? If I'm an IT buyer, maybe I'm reading Gartner reports, I'm attending these specific events, or maybe I'm active in these like Reddit forums, right? So you're really just going to have to understand who that buyer is that you're going after and build those engagement methods into your program, because you want to reach your buyers where they're at, right? And oftentimes it's not in one place. It's an approach over a long time to find them at the right channel on the right time. So I would say it's going to be a mix.
Yeah, I think that's an awesome answer. And I feel like another common theme I keep hearing, these ICPs, ideal customer profiles, are very rich for ABM. It's not just, where are they online? It's how do they get information and how are they building relationships wherever they are for the purpose of solving their business challenges, not necessarily, looking for your product. Paul, did you have something to add?
No, I think it's definitely multi-channel. It's definitely different strokes for different folks. I mean, certain things will resonate more, but in the B2B space that we typically deal with, the thing that has always been a constant, and maybe we're 20 years behind, so it's kind of could be the reason, is video is still the most interactive, effective way of explaining a very complex thing in a succinct, lucid fashion, and it tends to be the one that resonates across levels in an account and has the most viral load is the video piece. So but with subject matter expertise, case studies, white papers, basic marketing collateral, basic testimonials, everything has its merit and has its effectiveness, but video seems to be the one that still to this day in our space has the most impactful way of sort of driving across everybody.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Brian, you want to add to that?
Yeah, I agree with everything here. And one thing I would say is when you're selecting those channels, I mean, one, don't be afraid to test, but make sure whatever you leverage, make sure it has data points that you can respond to. If there's no way to track and measure if it's working, then it's really hard to assess that that's the channel you should be using. For example, on the ABM front, we create a lot of custom content for our sales team. You should be putting breadcrumbs on everything you put into a Salesforce. If you don't do that, you're going to lose track. So creating a piece of content, a piece of collateral that has no way of measuring, engagement with that piece. I mean, it makes it tough to determine if that's the right channel or the right place you should be putting your money.
That's a great point. I mean, I think a lot of content marketers get frustrated by not being able to measure the impact of their work, and doing simple things like that to track that viral load, as Paul described it, is really important, because then you know what's resonating, what's not, and where you can take your content calendar. The next question comes from Kay Lucido, and he's asking, or she, because it's a K, what does the marketing channel mix look like versus personal contact via sales? In other words, what is that balance between one-to-many messaging and one-to-one contact? And Damaris, you want to start with this one?
Sure. So I typically won't involve sales in messaging until I've got some type of engagement within the account. So they're engaging with our content. Maybe they've downloaded some things. They've attended maybe like a roundtable or something. We're using sales engagement software called Outreach. And there's a ton of tools out here like this. SalesLoft is another one. What we do is, as soon as we start to see that account spike and show engagement, we consider them the marketing qualified account. We automatically launch a set of engagement touch points on that platform. So what that platform does for us is it automates all the sales touches that need to happen to bring that account forward, right? And oftentimes it's like 16 touches across 30 days on the sales side. So once marketing's done its work to engage that account, it's time for a salesperson to start doing their outreach. when they launch that sequence, typically the first step in the sequence is like send an email and send a LinkedIn request. And then it continues over the course of 30 days. Hopefully they don't have to go the full 30 days of touches to make some sort of headway in that account. But typically that's the type of engagement. That's the line, right? The definitive line between marketing and sales, right? So marketing is working on all the marketing activities. The account starts to spike in terms of engagement, then we pass it off and kick off this sort of process that happens in outreach, which is just automating sales touches for us.
That is fantastic. Paul, do you have anything to add about that balance of one-to-many and one-to-one between sales and marketing?
Yeah, no, the part that I kept thinking about when Damaris was talking about is really at what point do you have to make it one-to-one when there's some situations where there's, a lot of engagement for whatever reason. I believe that the point, unless there's a relevant need, our brand managers and our marketing managers really should drive those discussions until it makes sense, because especially in times like now where we're blessed with a lot of demand, it will just fall flat. And if you'll get more attention with the sales team when times are a little tougher and leaner and they've got to go hunt for business, they tend to be a little bit more field marketing interested and lead gen interested. But until it really makes a relevant spike, I think it should stay in the marketing side to determine sort of their best approach. And then when it gets to that level, then you get to the one-on-one and you say, hey, something's going on here, guys, you need to sniff this out. But it's harder now with times being so good for a lot of the B2B side. It's really been it's important to the marketing person needs to take that lead to make sure that, hey, this is going to fall flat. I've got to make sure that it's relevant enough to even get their attention.
Yeah, otherwise you lose credibility with the salespeople, right? And they don't want, it's the same lead story, right? Where they don't want to follow up on your leads because you've sent them things that are just noisy and distracting.
Yeah. I'm going to try and squeeze in one more question. Do you belong to any professional organization specific to ABM? And this question comes from Lauren Schmidt, who is in ModOps Market Research Department. And Ryan is an ABM enthusiast.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, as far as and again, a lot of the training that we get, I mean, I'm part of ITSMA, right? So they not only have the certification program, but they have a wide variety of resources that they create for ABM. They have a network that they have for ABM, and that is personally what I am as far as an association around ABM. I mean, it's a community at the end of the day, so that's what I follow. Damaris, Paul.
Yeah, what's interesting is there used to be more things that were associated with ABM, like groups, but it's so much a part of demand generation now that you'll find it in any sort of group that you participate in that's demand gen centered. So I won't say there's like an association specific to ABM. It is now like you have to do this if you're a good marketer, right? You need to understand ABM. I will point you to, there are some awesome resources around ABM. For me, what really changed my perspective, aside from like serious stuff was great, but really the foremost like thinker on ABM is a gentleman by the name of John Miller, one of the co-founders of a platform called Marketo, the marketing automation platform. Went on to launch a company called Engagio that was an account-based marketing platform. And he wrote an awesome book called The Clear and Concise Guide to Account-Based Marketing. Still to this day, I have a copy of that book. I go back and I reference it. I will tell you, his company was sold to demand-based, and he has updated that book, and demand-based puts it out now with a newer revised version of it. So I would definitely get on John Miller's blog. Always has great anecdotes about ABM and just the evolution of it.
That's fantastic. Well,
Yeah.
we are a minute past time. Do you have anything to add, Paul?
No, that's it.
That's great. So thank you everyone for attending our very first virtual panel. This had so much rich information in it. It has been recorded. You'll all receive it, including some of these pointers and Damaris's tool for where you should do ABM, what tactics to do ABM at different points of the funnel. Yeah, and thank you so much for being on the panel and taking the time to be here. This was incredible. So I really appreciate it. And I think our clients are getting a ton of value out of this.